What was probably the rarest 350 cubic inch V8 ever used in square bodies, and only available from 1979 through 1981, and also only available in half-ton trucks. Alright, welcome to Squarebody Stuff. This is going to be another Motor Monday. I've got a little bit of background noise. It's pretty windy outside, so there's some creaks and groans and bangs and stuff going on in the shop around me, so can't do much about it, but the show must go on. So what we're going to get into is, like I said in the intro, a fairly rare 350 cubic inch engine that was only used for a few years in the square body trucks, and they're only available in half-ton trucks. Not any Suburbans, possibly some Blazers. We'll get into it. But before we do, ask you if you like what you see here, hit that subscribe button down below. Ring that notification bell, and that'll give you notification whenever we put new videos out. Give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. All that stuff helps this channel out. Something else that really helped this channel out is go down that description box below and check out my Teespring store. There's a link down there for my merchandise, and you can pick you up, you know, a hoodie, t-shirts. I've got some other hoodie. You know, I've got all sorts of designs. These are just a small sample of what I've got myself that I hang up here just to have a cheesy backdrop. So you guys go check that out. Find you something you like. There's a lot of cool designs. I'm still trying to work on some more. So go check them out. Find something you like. Okay, this engine I'm talking about today is 350 cubic inches, 5.7 liters. Only used from 79 through 81 and only in half-ton trucks. As far as I know, from GM literature, from the GM Heritage Center. Actually, honestly, the GM Heritage Center kind of left me high and dry on this engine in particular, because they didn't have a whole lot of information about it. So I had to go mainly to Google and some forums to find out more about this engine. So I actually had some facts to go with it. All right, so if you haven't guessed yet, we're talking about the 5.7 liter diesel. This diesel engine was designed by Oldsmobile. Now, there is some speculation or rumor that they were just a redesigned or repurposed gas engine. And that's actually been proven to be false. This engine was actually designed, and really, they took the basic design of the 350 Oldsmobile engine, but it is a completely different block. If you do any research on them, you'll have the 79 through 81 will be the D block, what they call them. It'll have a D stamp or cast into the block. And I think the 82 through 85 will be a DX block. And of course, like I just said, they were designed and produced from 78 through 85. But in the square body trucks, they were only used from 78 through 1981. A little bit more history about this engine and some specs about this engine before we get into how they're actually using the square bodies. I'm going to look at some notes, so I'm going to be looking down here because I can't remember all this stuff. They were 5.7 liter, 350 cubic inch, based on an Oldsmobile engine. Now they redesigned the whole block. The bore spacing, the bore size is the same as the 350 Olds gasoline motor. The bore size would be a 4.06, and the stroke is a 3.38. Now the crankshaft is also a completely different thing than the gas motors. It was completely redesigned, had bigger main journals, bigger rod journals. The connecting rods were bigger on the big end and also on the pin end. Pistons were completely different. Cylinder heads were completely different, because these things had a 22.5 to 1 compression ratio. They were rated 120 horsepower, 220 foot-pounds of torque or pound-feet of torque. Factory dual exhaust, that was kind of cool. I've actually got a 79 that was originally a diesel truck, the 5.7 liter diesel. The motor and transmission is long gone. The exhaust is still there. And it's got some cool exhaust tips on it that have a kind of a screen inside there. I think it's kind of a very crude spark arrestor is what they used. In the square body trucks, they were used from 79 through 81. That would be the LF9, Larry Frank 9 RPO code for these. Of course, the D block, like I went over earlier. And on your VIN, it would be a Z code for your engine identification. They were only available with an automatic transmission, and they were never designed for any towing or any load carrying capacity. They were only designed for passenger transportation. So why did GM even try this in a pickup truck when, people are going to try to tow with them? Not really sure, other than fuel mileage. These engines were designed for fuel mileage, and that is pretty much it. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, they were only available in a half-ton pickup truck. From what I found through looking through some research and stuff, they weren't available in anything else. Suburbans or Blazers or crew cabs or anything like that, or 3/4 tons or 4-wheel drives. It was only the half-ton 2-wheel drive pickups. Now, with that said, while doing research, I ran across a video of what was supposed to be an original 1982 Blazer, 2-wheel drive Blazer, that was supposed to have an original 5.7 liter diesel in it. Now, my explanation for that, how that would be possible, is because in that video, he panned to the back end of the truck, or the Blazer, and it had a Saskatchewan license plate on it. So I'm just going to guess, I don't have any facts on this, that possibly in Canada, they did produce the 5.7 liter diesel later than 81, and they were also possibly available in Blazers. Now, there is a chance that this Blazer could have been special ordered. It could have been a very late 81 that was actually titled as an 82. It's hard to say. A lot of this is just kind of speculation. The facts I've given you before is about the only facts I do have. But there again, pretty rare motor. You don't see them a lot. There's very few of them that are still left running because they were pretty much a bomb. So to touch briefly on some of the failures of this engine, and they were kind of numerous, and they were a headache for a lot of dealerships back in the day. I actually talked to a guy I work with that was working in dealerships back in the late 70s, early 80s when these engines came out, and he said they were a nightmare. Going over some stuff I found out about them, the head bolts, they weren't strong enough to hold the compression. They were a torque to yield head bolt, and they just didn't hold up. They would shear off the head bolts or blow the head gaskets because the head bolts would stretch. So that was a nightmare just on the head gaskets and head bolts. There's also problems with the heads cracking because of the flex, because the head bolts weren't strong enough. And along with the head bolts being a torque to yield and certain specifications on these engines when they were new, back in those days, diesels were not a common thing that these technicians were dealing with. So they didn't sometimes know exactly how to handle these issues. And that ran into even more problems. They would fix the issue and only to have that issue come back up, and maybe even worse the next time the vehicle came in. They were also plagued with some fuel system issues. They didn't use a water separator, and of course even nowadays most of your diesel vehicles have a water separator on them on your fuel system. And apparently back in those days there's a big issue with the diesel fuel having a lot of moisture in it. Without a water separator, the fuel systems would actually rust from the inside out. Another issue with having the water in the fuel system is people would use the dry gas, the stuff to dry out your fuel. And what that would do is actually inside the injector pump, any of the rubber seals inside the injector pump or any of the rubber seals inside the fuel system, they would dry up, flake off, or get brittle and break off, plug up the injectors, cause a whole nother set of issues. Another common failure on these I found out was the timing chain that ran the injection pump and camshaft. It would stretch prematurely, so your camshaft and your injector pump timing would get retarded, and it would run rough. It would be hard to start. It would blow a lot of black smoke and just not have less power than what even less power than what it had before. One more thing I found out about these, a common issue was the short main bolts. They weren't drilled deep enough into the block. Now the block itself was heavy enough, They really beefed up these blocks. They were several pounds heavier than your standard gas 350 block. And we'll get into something kind of interesting about that fact in just a little bit. But because they weren't drilled and tapped deep enough, the main bolts were short, so they would actually pull out of the block. And with that flex, you could break crankshafts, you could break main webs, cause all sorts of problems on the bottom end. The crankshafts weren't balanced the best. They kind of rushed this thing through production and through the R&D to try to get these things out there sold, to try to beat this fuel embargo or whatever they had going on back then. Now, there was very few benefits to this diesel engine that they produced in the Squarebodies. The fuel mileage was supposed to be great as long as you didn't try to run them hard. If you were very easy on the throttle and just let them do their own thing, they got very good fuel mileage. I don't know any specific numbers. I think some of the claims were like 25 to 30 miles a gallon possibly out on the highway. So that would be a great benefit, but the cons outweighed the pros, unfortunately, on these things. They like to find these blocks. There's a lot of Oldsmobile guys like to find these blocks, the D blocks as they call them, or the DX blocks that were designed for the diesels, because they will accept a lot of the gas engine, the heads, so you can build have a really stout block for a gas motor. A lot of drag racing guys like to use these. Another kind of interesting thing I've heard about these engines from back in the day is guys would have these trucks with and obviously the transmissions that were in these trucks had the Buick Olds Pontiac bell housing pattern, which was different than the Chevrolet. And they had the same motor mounts as the Oldsmobile. So you could actually drop a 350 rocket, 455 rockets. Not real familiar with all of the different displacements Oldsmobile had, but they had the 350. I know the 455, that was a big common swap back in the days, because they would just slide right in there with really no modifications, other than you had to hook up an ignition system for your distributor. But that's about it, and you'd have a 455 rocket in your little short bed half ton. How cool would that be? Hope you guys learned a little bit of something about these little V8 diesels they put in the Squarebodies. It was kind of interesting for me to learn a little bit about them, so I just wanted to pass it along. So until next time, y'all keep your Squarebodies rolling, and we will catch you later.